So the market is buzzing, interest rates are down, and investors are definitely on the move. John and I did an episode recently about talking about your strategy and making sure in these crazy times that you're really taking stock of your decisions before making them and, really making well-researched decisions. And we've decided to do a series on different areas, specifying in different areas. And today is our first episode in that series, and we're going to do a deep dive into an area that I would like to learn more about as well, which is regional Victoria. To help us on this journey, we have somebody who's on the ground in regional Victoria, a buyer's agent with Envisage Property called Kimberley Gelhar. How are you, Kimberley?
I'm good, thanks. How are you?
Yeah, thank you so much for joining us. You're listening to This is Property. My name's Rachelle Kroon. Let's dive in. So first question, Kimberley, tell me what a day as a buyer's agent looks like.
Look, no 2 days are the same. We're always doing different things. At times we can be on the ground inspections, doing research in the background. It's really a mixed role, but always in the real estate space, looking at different properties, liaising with clients and agents throughout.
Yeah, and I think more and more people are getting excited about the concept or needing to use a buyer's agent or wanting to use a buyer's agent, especially with the lack of stock. And I think the biggest noise that we're hearing is people having trouble finding properties. How has that been for you in regional Victoria?
Yeah, look, stock levels in general are pretty tight, and it is hard to find those good quality properties that we can get tenants into or is ready for someone to move in straight away. Those are quite scarce, I guess, in the good areas that we want to be in. But trying to have our forefront in the game, the relationships that we've got with real estate agents helps to give us a little bit of a lead in that space.
Yeah, great. So how important are your relationships with the real estate agents locally when you're looking for properties for your clients?
Oh, it's absolutely critical, whether that's from hearing about them before properties are actually listed on the market, which gives us extra time to make sure we're researching, doing all our due diligence. So when it's live, if we're not getting an opportunity to purchase it we're straight into it. We've got everything ready to go and our ducks in a line, because that's what we're seeing at the moment is that properties are getting listed and it's first open home and they're selling straight after. So you need to be ready to go and have all your information in front of you ready.
Yeah, so I've heard that so much lately of people saying as soon as they're listed and they're calling, they're already gone. So are you hearing that a lot in the area that you're working in?
Oh, definitely. There's one agency that we do a fair bit with, and they list on a Wednesday or a Thursday. They do the first open home on a Saturday, and it's final offers by 3 p.m. on the Saturday. So the turnaround is within a few days. So if you're not there, you don't see that property listed, if you're not on realestate.com every single day, you're missing out.
Yeah, so regional Victoria as a general area, tell me about that. Tell me why investors are coming to regional Victoria.
Yeah, so I guess affordability is probably one of the key aspects, really. So metros are getting priced out, and then it gives a little bit more of an affordability price being able to go into these regions. A lot of the major regions as well, they have all the infrastructure there. They've got the schools, they've got the hospitals, they've got the employment opportunities. So there's everything that they need to be that little city that they operate on their own. And a lot of these that we work in, they may be an hour and a half to get to Melbourne. So you've still got that opportunity where it's close enough that you can commute there if you need it, but they've got all those lifestyle opportunities. There's a little bit more room. There might be a little bit more, gardens or forests or beach or that lifestyle that gives them the space around it, which we find a lot of people are driving, especially those families.
There's obviously some different areas that you would specialise in. What are some of those towns in regional Victoria that are popular at the moment or maybe have shifted recently?
Yeah, and look, it's going to be a little bit different for each client depending on their strategy, whether they're chasing that capital growth or yield and budgets. Some of the key ones we're probably operating a lot in would be maybe Geelong, Bendigo, Shepparton. That's probably 3 of our major ones at the moment.
So now I don't know a lot about any of those areas. So tell me what's great about somewhere like Geelong.
Yeah, Geelong, like being on the coast, I feel like a lot of people love that lifestyle aspect. So you've got the surf coast, which is not far down, but it's still maybe an hour to get into Melbourne. There's also train lines that run straight from Geelong to Melbourne, so a lot of people do that commute. But Geelong itself has, quite a lot of major employment opportunities there. So you've got places like, WorkSafe or TAC who have developed these little sub offices around the area. So there's a lot of major employment going on there that people are sustaining high professional jobs in these locations. And then they've still got that lifestyle. They've got the beach, they've got the trees, they've got that nice sort of family feel to the suburbs without being in the hustle and the bustle of Melbourne.
Yeah, and sometimes when people hear regional, they don't think beaches. So Geelong's actually a beach town.
Absolutely. Yeah, down on the coast, beautiful.
Now, I read somewhere recently that Geelong had surpassed the Sunshine Coast for growth in a regional town. So it says obviously they've had some substantial growth recently in Geelong.
Yeah, Geelong has got a lot of development going on, and there's a lot of space around Geelong. So you've got the CBD itself, and there's quite a few like established suburbs around that, which might be like Geelong West or Belmont, Highton, Grovedale. Like they're built up and stuff now, but it's starting to sprawl out further. So if you think of the next town or next major town that was always established would be like, Torquay, that's maybe 45 minutes out from Geelong, half an hour, 45 minutes. But there's all these little towns or little developments that are now getting built up in between, which, there's some of the greenfield estates, which we do have to be a little bit cautious of from an investment side of things. But there is a lot of space. There's room for these developments to go up, which is feeding that population growth.
Yeah, great. So there has been a lot of growth in those areas over the last, 12 to 18 months. Are they predicted to have further growth in somewhere like Geelong?
We're definitely seeing that because of the migration rates, especially from like Melbourne coming out to Geelong, are still quite high. We did see a little bit of a drop, like COVID, there was that big peak out, and there was a slight drop there, but we're definitely seeing that still coming back in, people chasing those lifestyle components to it.
Yeah, so I think the COVID thing's important. So there was some changes. Talk us through a little bit about what happened there.
In Victoria, we had quite harsh lockdowns. So there was that ring of steel that really separated out Melbourne from the regions. And as a result, a lot of people went to the regions. I grew up in regional Victoria, so lucky enough, I was in that region already. But we did see a lot of people, pushing out further and getting to those more regional areas to try escape those harsh lockdowns. Some employers did get a little bit strict on this with the working from home arrangements, which saw some people going back to Melbourne. But there's still constantly that drive for people that are starting families, that they want more space. They don't want to be in this little townhouse. They want to have a backyard for their children to run around in, which is, seeing that consistent, more stable growth back out to the regions as well.
Yeah, great. And so going back to sort of regional VIC, and there was some changes during COVID, but there's also been some, political impacts that may have changed things for investors. Have you seen any investors be concerned about Victoria because of some of those changes?
Yeah, and I think this is definitely a struggle for some people to sort of get their head around, especially people interstate that maybe then investing into Victoria. And with some of the government changes around land tax, it has created a little bit of an unease for some people that are worried about where the government's going to go next. But at the end of the day, the government policies are constantly changing, and what's changing in Victoria, you don't know that's not coming somewhere else. We can't let that dictate what our decisions are going to be completely.
Yeah, and I agree with that. So I was talking to a client recently that actually had just bought or was buying in regional Victoria, and the purchase price was about $600,000, and they were concerned about that land tax. And I think they thought it was going to be a huge amount each year. But when they actually said, and I said, well, do you know how much that land tax component is? It actually turned out to be under $1,000 a year. But I think the word land tax made them really alarmed. But when they actually saw the dollar figure, it was a really different thought process. So I think, is land tax an issue for investors? Absolutely. But knowing what dollar figure that is really important as well. because the price point where you're buying in regional VIC is very different, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. It can be quite affordable, and it gives some options for people that may have those lower budgets that they can still get in. They can be investing, putting their money to work to get themselves some growth. And even in some of those more affordable pockets, we are still seeing that capital growth happening. So there's definitely potential still there.
We talk about affordability, just so someone can put a number on it. Can you just give me maybe one of your last properties that you've purchased for a client, just that sort of level of price and what their rent return was?
Yeah, okay. So if we jump to something, say Shepparton's probably one of our more affordable areas. There was one purchase, what's this one? So we were sitting at about 420K was our, 420K was our purchase price, and that was renting for $450 a week. So that's a 5.6% yield on that purchase. That was end of last year, and the current value is sitting at $450K now. So they've made $30K in just over 6 months on that, and they're getting that strong yield as well.
So $420,000, that seems like a really low purchase price. What kind of property was that?
Yeah, so it was a 3-bed, 1-bath, 600 square metre block approximately, well presented. They didn't really need to do anything else to get in, tenant straight into it. I will be honest with you, 420 was probably end of last year. I don't think we'd be getting in at that price now. It'd probably be more, mid to high 400s is probably the entry level
but it's
price
good.
now, something like that.
But it's good to know that there is movement. Now, for that property, just sort of diving into that, so you're 600 square metres of land, you've got a 3-bed, 1-bath, the rent return's $450 a week. That's a really good rent return for that purchase price. How far is that? So I don't know the area of Shepparton. So tell me how far is Shepparton from Melbourne itself?
Yeah, so it's probably a 2-hour drive back to Melbourne, a couple of hours back. Shepparton is a little bit further out. We don't find many people that are in Shepparton are doing like a daily commute into Melbourne. It's not really that sort of distance to be able to do that. Like Geelong or something, you could probably do the commute. Shepparton's a little bit further out. But they have their own employment opportunities, people that are quite self-sustained and happy being within the town themselves.
But it's got its own economy. So there's a lot of different industries in Shepparton itself.
Definitely, yeah. So they've got a major sort of agricultural component. So they're really known for their like fruit, their dairy, sheep, cows. They've got a university there. They're doing some like big road and rail upgrades that are planned. So there's a lot of different types of employment going on.
Yeah, so you're finding that so investors that are buying there, what's the rental vacancy? Is there a big vacancy in Shepparton?
No, vacancies are super tight, especially those like houses on their own land. Like units and townhouses and something like Shepparton probably don't perform quite as well. There's not as much demand for it, but we're finding all of our houses, where possible, we try to get them sort of advertised in the final stages of before settlement, and we're finding most of the time that we can get them rented very quickly.
Yeah, great. All right. Well, we might take a break there and come back and talk about a few more specific examples of properties that you've purchased for investors.
This is Property is brought to you by Sphere Home Loans. Sphere Home Loans is a mortgage broker that helps our listeners all around Australia. So, if you want to get into your first home sooner, looking at upgrading, an additional property, or want your current mortgage reviewed, just search Sphere Home Loans or click the link in the show notes, and their dedicated brokers will be able to help you wherever you are. If you are, however, after personal financial advice, don't get it from a podcast. If you would like help based on your own personal situation, head over to moneypodcast.com.au, click Get Help, and we'd be happy to introduce you to one of our trusted professionals. That's moneypodcast.com.au and click Get Help.
Okay, we are back with Kimberley, who's a buyer's agent specialising in regional Victoria, and we're talking about those areas. We've had a little bit of chat about Geelong and touched on Shepparton. I'd like to hear a little bit more about Bendigo, the other area. So tell me about Bendigo. Where is it? And tell me a little bit about the town.
Yeah, so Bendigo is probably an in-between distance between Shepparton and Geelong. It's about an hour and a half from Melbourne. Similar again, like it has its own centre, the Bendigo sort of CBD, which has got a lot more going on. They've got their own employment opportunities as well. So there's been some work around the airport and the hospital upgrades, which has drawn in some of that employment opportunities there as well. Bendigo, we find the price point is sort of an in-between as well of Shepparton and Bendigo. You're probably getting in there between maybe 600K is probably a comfortable price point to get in. Yields aren't quite as strong as Shepparton, but we're still seeing some capital growth happening there.
Yeah, great. So Shepparton is maybe a little bit further out, has a better yield, a lower price point. Then we come to Bendigo. So can you give me an example of a property that you may have sourced recently in Bendigo and maybe what that investor's profile was?
Yeah, okay, cool. So I can give you one. This is probably a 12-month ago purchase, and it'll give you a bit of an idea of where this property has gone from then. It was actually a young girl working as a professional, and she wanted to buy her first investment property, priced out of the Melbourne market, so was looking at it as a region to get into the property game. So we bought out in a suburb called Strathfields A, which is actually a little bit out of Bendigo, but it's quite a lot of professionals that live in this suburb, lots of families. It's got a really nice, like green, grassy, foresty sort of appeal to it. So we purchased that for $530K last year, about 12 months ago, and that was renting at $480 a week. So that's a 4.7% yield at that. Current value is now $615K. So that's probably a very big growth. We don't always see quite that much. But yeah, that's the current value of that one.
So that is more than I would have expected in 12 months in regional Victoria. What do you, I guess, first of all, what sort of asset was it? What sort of house was that the property that was purchased for initially?
Yeah, so similar again to that Shepparton property. It was a 3-bed, 1-bath. I couldn't give you the exact block size, but it was more than 600 square meters, so a decent sort of size out there. Again, well-presented house, didn't need any work to get in. There was a shed at the back, which was quite desirable for some with that side access out there. We do find that in some of the regional towns, especially like all your trades and stuff, they love having that extra shed and space out there. So yeah, that one rented really quickly. We did get a pretty good price on that as well because 12 months ago, the market was acting very differently to what it was now. It was that buyer's market. We had room to negotiate with it. When you had a seller that was motivated to sell, we got in at a good price. And yeah, it's just being reflected in that now.
So tell me about that. So you were in a buyer's market 12 months ago. Tell me in these regional towns, how have you seen it evolve in the last 12 months?
I honestly reckon it was after Christmas, coming back in the new year, it was just like coming back into this completely different market. Like we were going in and there'd be no offers on a property and, it'd be a good location. It sort of looked all right, presented well, building and pestle, come back fine. And we were just negotiating with the vendor, just trying to come to that agreement between us of like a price that we were happy to pay. We didn't really have all that other competition that's going on, which now we're going into it and there's always other people putting offers out, whether that's bidding against, whether that's best and final offers. There's so much more competition now that's starting to drive those prices up further.
Yeah. And so things like, I guess the projected growth for regional Victoria, do you think, when your investors are coming to the area, what sort of stats are they looking at? What are the things that they're looking at that they want to see for future growth? Are they looking at like what the projected, development is that's being planned around those areas?
Yeah, so there's quite a lot of statistics that we're looking at within it to make sure that these suburbs are meeting our targets. So we're looking at like past capital growth, we're looking at vacancy rates, we're looking at employment, what the employment rates are, household incomes, making sure that they're able to afford these prices and that we're not going in where the incomes are too low to be able to afford the rents or the house prices. So we're not paying overs for what's reasonable for that area. So there's a lot of different statistics that we're looking at when we're looking at these suburbs as a whole. But then even within these suburbs as a whole, like if you take Bendigo, there are so many surrounding suburbs other than just Bendigo. You've got, Strathdale and Kennington and Flora Hill and Golden Square and Strathfields A. Like there's so many other components of it. And not every one of these suburbs that's surrounded is performing the same either, which is another interesting thing to be looking at.
So with the little towns that are outside of Bendigo, can there be a big difference from an investor's perspective about, if that's going to be have a good rental yield or things like that, or if there's going to be more vacancy? Are there big differences between those places?
Oh yeah, definitely. And some of it is, I guess when you're a local, you live in the town, you get to know what the good and the bad, suburbs and streets are within that. So there is that town feel to it, and where those have got the reputation around the good and the better areas, that definitely plays into it as well. But I guess it's also what's going on in those individual suburbs. So, you've got like the uni in Flora Hill, which that's obviously going to have the students looking around that sort of area and drives in that sort of focus to it as well. So all the different suburbs do sort of interact a little bit differently, and we do definitely see differences in capital growth, vacancy rates, yields, all of that within the different suburbs.
Yeah, great. So out of all of those, out of those regional VIC, what has been your, favourite at the moment? Where are you seeing the most activity for yourself?
It's so hard to give an answer because it depends. Like, what do you want out of it? Like, what are you looking for? What is your strategy? And I think this is where we need to go back to that strategy conversation. You can't just jump into buying a property without understanding all of the data behind it and what you're looking for within that property.
And that is really good, because I think a lot of people do get their pre-approval and just jump onto realestate.com and look at what properties are available. And I have also been guilty of this myself.
Oh, we all
it's
are.
Just something, it's just human nature. So tell me about, so when you're looking at a client and what they're looking for, you're looking at their entire brief.
Absolutely. So at Envisage Property, there's almost like a 2-step process of how we go about this. So the first step is meeting with John Pigeon, and he will sit down and he works out the strategy. And he doesn't always just focus, or we rarely ever just focuses on one state unless there's a specific reason for that. But we've got buyers agents working across the country. And so he's looking at data from every different state and comparing different suburbs within those states to find out where the best place is that's going to fit their strategy, what they're looking for within that property. So yeah, it's sort of that two-phase approach where you've got that strategy with John, and then that's when us BAs come in and we work on finding the property that suits that strategy.
Yeah, great. So somebody comes to you, they've generally already got their buyer's brief. You know exactly what they're looking for, what yield's important, what's important to them, and then you're on the ground actually negotiating with the agents, trying to find the property that fits that brief.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's our role.
Is there any other properties that you found recently that you think people might find really interesting, or a different price point that you go, here's something that we've had recently that I think might be interesting to people looking at regional Victoria?
Yeah, look, I'll give you a story, which I think is quite an interesting one, and it sort of highlights the role of a buyer's agent. We had one, let me grab the numbers up in front of me so I can not screw this up. But so this is a Geelong property. It was actually in Belmont. So It sold for $839,000 in November 21. 4-bed, 2-bath. There was actually nothing wrong with it. Good location. The property itself presented well. There was a few, minor maintenance things that needed to be done, but nothing that was like, this is a red flag property, anything to be worried about. It was bought through another buyer's agent. Now, this came into the market about a month ago, and we secured it for $720,000. $120,000 loss from these investors from a previous buyer's agent. And when I saw the last sale result, I, immediately had this conversation I was like, do they know how they're taking this as a loss? Because there was a little bit of competition at our price point, but to get back to where they were was not realistic. And there was a slight peak in the market in Geelong in, that 2020, end of 2021, post-COVID sort of times. And we did have a little bit of a flat period and correction after that. 120K, no way. So they've bought through a previous buyer's agent in the heat of the market and been so desperate to get in and just secure a property that they've overpaid. They haven't done the due diligence. They haven't looked at all the comparable sales. And ultimately, it's just ended up in a major loss for them because they haven't been able to hold the property long term.
And I guess if someone's selling a property within a year, it's probably being done because they need to.
Yeah.
like generally people don't buy to think to hold for something for a year. So I'm guessing things like interest rate rises have maybe put the pressure on them not to be able to hold. And I think that's really important, because if you can't afford to hold the property, this is the thing, it's great to buy a property, but you also need to be able to hold it. So having to sell with $120,000 loss, that must have been heartbreaking for them.
Yeah, no one goes into the property market wanting to sell at a loss. We're all planning. Well, I mean, the clients that we have, it's a long-term game. Property isn't a gamble. We shouldn't be trying to, hope that we're going to have a short-term win on it. It is a long-term. There's a lot of entry costs, selling costs that come into it. And if you are planning to change around in a couple of years, it does end up quite not always as effective. So it is that long-term game that we need to be thinking about to make sure that the costs are sort of outweighing that growth in that property.
Yeah, and those cost to holds are so important all the way along. So I think, but there are a lot of people looking to buy at the moment, and the price point for certain areas they were looking at just aren't available to them anymore. So I think maybe encouraging people to look outside what they know, and look, some of those prices that you've mentioned, they are lower than a lot of people would consider they would be able to find a house like that for.
Yeah, and when you factor in the yields as well, like it makes the holding costs quite manageable as well, that you don't have to put too much extra into that property to be able to hold it. And if we're getting that capital growth still happening within it, we're still ahead in the end.
Yeah, so those yields are a lot more achievable for a lot of people to hold than they would look at in maybe in some other different states and cities. So I do encourage people to look outside their backyard. With Victoria, I think with that land tax, it is something you need to understand, but also weigh up those options of how much does it actually cost. Now, tell me one last question. You are on the ground in regional Victoria every day looking for properties for investors. What is the thing that you love most about regional Victoria for investors?
Look, I'll start with the personal. Is the area. Like I grew up in regional Victoria. I've always loved the space. You can run around with the children. You can go down to the beach. You can go into the forest. Whatever that is, there's all that space around. There's such a lifestyle aspect that comes to the regions, and each region has their own, benefits and the little quirks that they've got to them. So I think that lifestyle component is really important. But then also from an investment side of things, it's trying to look at what's the budgets, what's the government doing, where's the money being spent, what are the migration rates, what's driving people to each of those suburbs, and just making sure that there is that demand for it in there to make sure we're focusing in on the right spaces.
Yeah, great. Well, look, thank you so much for giving us all of those updates about regional Vic. You've definitely opened my eyes to a few areas that I had not considered before. If you wanted to reach out to Kimberley or Envisage Property, we'll put the link in our show notes. Thank you so much for joining us today and for sharing your insights. You've been listening to This is Property. My name's Rachelle Kroon, and we'll see you next week.
Any information given in this podcast is for entertainment purposes only, and you should seek your own property advice before acting on anything you may hear in this podcast. If you want to start or advance your property education journey, John Pidgeon's book, Sort Your Property Out and Build Your Future, is available where all good books are sold, or via the link in the podcast show notes. Opinions or comments from any guests on the podcast are theirs and not those of the hosts, the publisher, or their respective license holders.